Hi there. I'm just going to show you an idea for one way you can set up your XR18 so that it can work with your iPad to be both a mixer and an audio interface at the same time, but also you can enhance the audio capabilities of your iPad using some of the routing features on the XR18. I'm using the XR software here on desktop because it's got a few more features that are not available in the iPad app. I'm starting here with an empty default blank template, just initialized settings, the default routings for factory settings. What we're going to do is this will behave for channels 1 to 12. It will behave like a regular mixer, as expected. So inputs on the front of the mixer, inputs 1 to 12 will correspond to channels 1 to 12. I plug my guitar into channel 12. The signal will appear here. I can control the level with this fader, and the audio will be routed to the main outputs here, left and right. Channel 13 and 14 will only work, excuse me, when you're using your iPad. But when you are, what these will allow you to do is you plug your guitar into input 13 on the front of the mixer. That signal gets sent to the iPad, gets processed by iPad effects, and then returned to the mixer on this channel 13 and mixed in with everything else. So it's like having iPad insert effects on your XR18 mixer channels. So 13 and 14 iPad inserts. The aux channel 17 and 18, normally the signal for this comes from the actual 17 and 18 inputs on the front of the mixer, but we're not going to use those inputs at all. Instead, this signal is going to be the output of the iPad over USB. So your default system iPad audio. Okay. 15 and 16 is going to be another stereo output from the iPad that you can use for alternative uses. So it's like an alternative stereo bus. And then finally, we're going to use the buses, bus 1 and 2 on the XR18 as a mix bus that we can send as a stereo input into the iPad. So we can mix any combination of these sources on the mixer into the iPad. We'll be using this for loopback and for streaming and other kind of creative uses. Excuse me. Now, let's start with the iPad audio. We're going to send it to this channel. So we go to the in-out settings and the USB returns tab. USB returns is anything coming from the iPad into the XR18 over USB. So what we want is the aux LR channel. That's this. That's this, which corresponds to this. We want that to get a signal from 1 and 2. There we go. 1 and 2 is going to aux left, right. Now that's routed, but it's not enabled. So I just need to switch it on. We go to the aux channel, select the channel tab. No, select the input tab and turn on USB for channel source instead of aux input. Okay, so now instead of the aux input, 17 and 18 on the front of the mixer, instead of that feeding this channel, the USB 1 and 2 is feeding that channel. And USB 1 and 2 output from the iPad is the stereo output. Whenever you play music, watch YouTube, Netflix, whenever you start a music app, by default, that will go to USB 1 and 2, which will be sent to this channel. Let me just rename the channel. I'm going to call it iPad left, right. Okay. So that's that. Let's go to 15 and 16. I'm going to stereo link them. So now this acts as one stereo channel. I'm going to change the source to USB. If I change one, it changes both. I'm actually going to change the USB return as well. Currently, they're receiving from USB 15 and 16. I'm going to change it to 3 and 4. And I'll tell you why in a second. I'm going to rename them iPad 3 and iPad 4. I'm going to color them. Okay, the reason I made this 3 and 4 is because the main stereo output from the iPad is USB 1 and 2. I've just made an alternative stereo output from the iPad to make it easy for me to remember where it's coming from. I'm just calling it 3 and 4. Okay. Let's go to our iPad effects inserts channels, 13 and 14. So again, I'm going to change them to USB source for both. USB source. I'm not going to change the return because this is actually convenient. If I plug into input 13 on the front of the mixer, that signal gets sent to my iPad. And on my iPad, if I select input 13, that's the same thing. If I send that to output 13, that gets received in channel 13 on the mixer. So I'm keeping the USB return numbers the same on 13 and 14, just for naming's sake, so I can remember where everything is routed when I'm using AUM. So I'm going to rename these iPad 13 and iPad 14 and change the color to make them easy to see. Okay. So let's go to bus 1 and 2. Bus 1, I'm going to select the channel and stereo link it. Okay. So bus 1 and 2 is now a stereo bus channel. Let's go to the inputs and outputs, and we will go to the USB sends tab. Now, USB sends is what you see in the iPad when you open up a recording channel. You have 18 available USB audio inputs to your iPad, numbered 1 to 18. This bus, this stereo bus here, bus 1 and 2, if I want to use that for streaming, for example, I can set up a mix of, for example, microphone 1, bass, guitar, vocals, guitar with iPad effects, iPad mix 1, iPad mix 2. And XR18 effects. I can send this mix to bus 1 and 2, that stereo bus, and then that can be recorded in the iPad. But in order for it to show up in, for example, the Facebook app, if you're recording with Facebook, if you're streaming with Facebook, in order for it to show up there, you need to set bus 1 and 2 to send to USB 1 and 2. And I'm going to change them to post fader. Okay. So bus 1 and 2 is going to USB 1 and 2. In my iPad, I open up a recording channel and I set its input to USB 1 and 2. What it records is this mix on bus 1 and 2. Okay. Hope that's clear. Now, what that allows you to do is, as I said before, set up a mix that you can use for streaming. If you're using the Facebook or YouTube app, they will only by default look at inputs, USB inputs 1 and 2. So that's why I have set bus 1 and 2 to go to USB 1 and 2. Okay. Another thing you can do with this bus is, let's say I'm playing a YouTube video on my iPad. The audio for it would come out on this channel. What if I want to record that audio in my iPad? Well, very simple. I go to bus 1 and 2. I send iPad main output to bus 1 and 2. And then in my iPad, I open up my recording app and I set its input to USB 1 and 2. It will record this audio. Okay, so you can loop back audio and record stuff on your iPad that's not audio bus or AUM or inter-app audio capable. And you can set up a streaming mix. Let's have a look at the inputs one more time because we have to change one thing here. So currently, the way this works, USB 1 and 2 on your iPad, the inputs 1 and 2 will see bus 1 and 2. Input 3 to 16 will see inputs 3 to 16 on the front of your mixer. And input 17 and 18 are receiving the aux input. Inputs 1 and 2 on your mixer are not going to the iPad. So we're going to change that. We're going to put input 1 and 2 into USB 17 and 18, and we're not going to use the aux inputs. Simple as that. It's a kind of a trade-off. You're losing 2 inputs on the front of the mixer, but those inputs don't have any EQ on them, I believe. Let me check. They don't have any EQ on them. Oh, they do. They don't have any compressor and they don't have a gate. There's less control on the inputs and they're not balanced inputs. So I'm not bothered about losing them when I'm gaining this stereo bus instead. It's a fair trade-off. Okay, I think that has explained everything. I hope it has. I hope it's of help to you. I'm up to 9 minutes. Let's see if I can explain just one more time, recap in less than a minute how this works. So we've set this all up. We've got our mixer. Channels 1 to 12 behave exactly as expected, as a mixer would. Inputs 1 to 12 on the front of your XR18 correspond to channels 1 to 12 on the mixer here. Each fader controls each channel, and they get sent to the main left and right outputs as expected. Channel 13 only works when your iPad is plugged in and you've set it up. If you're not using your iPad, anything plugged into input 13, you won't be able to do anything with it in the mixer. But if you do plug in your iPad and you set it up, you can plug an input into input 13 on the front of the mixer. It will get sent to the iPad. You can process it, send it back out, and receive it on this channel. So you've got iPad insert effects on channel 13 and 14. Incidentally, you can use these channels as simple mono outputs for the iPad if you want. If you want to send a synth to channel 13 or channel 14, just set that up. You don't have to use the actual inputs on the front of the mixer. The aux channel 17 and 18 has been repurposed. So the iPad main system audio output is coming in on this channel, stereo channel, by the way. And you've got an alternative stereo channel on 15 and 16 to send alternative mix to. The actual inputs on the front of the mixer, 1 and 2 are being received in the iPad on USB 17 and 18, inputs 17 and 18. And apart from that, channels 3 right through to 16, even though you can't see some of these on the mixer, 3 through to 16 are being received on inputs, USB inputs, 3 to 16 within the iPad. So you can record all of those channels exactly as they are when you've plugged them into the mixer. Then finally, we've set up a stereo bus 1 and 2, which we can create a mix for of any combination of these inputs and outputs, including the iPad output itself, including inputs 13, which are going to the iPad and coming back again to this channel. You can send it back to the iPad on this stereo bus, and including the XR18 effects as well. So you can set up a stereo bus for something like, for example, streaming. That is coming in on inputs USB 1 and 2 within the iPad, so that they are seen by default by, for example, apps like Facebook and YouTube when you're recording. You can also use this bus 1 and 2 stereo bus as a loopback software. So if you're playing music on your iPad or YouTube or watching a movie, you can record the audio into a separate app if you set the channel to inputs 1 and 2. Okay, so I hope this has been helpful. It is a way of turbocharging your iPad with an audio interface and turbocharging your XR18 with some extra effects and routing capabilities within the iPad. I hope this has been of help to you. If there's anything you didn't understand or got lost in, let me know. I know it's so complicated. Let me know. If there's anything else you want to ask me about, feel free to hit me up. Good luck. Cheers.